Welcome to Mental Millennials with your host, Shelby Friesen.
Today, guys, I've got Jesse Van Dok, and he was, kind of got in touch through a couple of my previous guests, through Finn, and then who was kind of referred through my editor, so kind of like gone through the chain of people. And Jesse has now you've been sober for 20 months.
Correct.
And that's awesome, so congratulations on that. And I've heard a little bit about your business, and then you just showed me a little trailer for a project you're working on, and a little documentary. So I'm really curious to kind of get to hear. We'll get into kind of like your past with addiction and other things, and see how this has all like evolved into what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And from that, I think I'm really curious to hear about your experience when you were 8 years old, and see like how that kind of tied into the addiction and how it went from there.
Yeah. So I come from a really good family, actually. My parents are still together, a brother and a sister. And, my dad worked hard. And just from a young age, I guess I acted up quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some sexual assault happen when I was younger. Not in the sense that, like I was actually assaulted in a physical way, but, sexual abuse nonetheless. I was a babysitter that read me a book about, like lovemaking at the age of 4.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up getting caught, and I lived in a town of 200 people messing around with a girl my age. And they were like, like the stuff that he was doing, like, how does he know? They assumed that my parents had been raping me.
Mm-hmm.
So they called the protective services on my parents. I had to go to psychology, like a psychologist at the age of 4, pretty much proving that my parents hadn't sexually abused me.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, I just kind of thought that was something that happened, and I dealt with it. And my life just kept going in this way where I was acting out. I was not really allowed to have a lot of friends because of the way that I acted. I was still being, sexual with girls too, and getting caught and having to go to psychology. And it led to a lot of isolation for myself, which led to me, trying to hang out with older people. Which again led to more sexual abuse from older men, and which eventually led into some drug use. I think when I was 12 was the first time that I drank. A friend and his mom was a drug addict as well, and she would buy us beer. And literally, she would buy us a 2 for a beer just to let us go have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And at the age of 12, that's not very good. Right?
No.
So I started drinking then, and then was hanging out with some other kids that were from the other side of town, and just wanted to have friends. So I started smoking weed. And yeah, you could just see this progression over my life of, weed became my identity. That's how I was cool. I was a stoner guy. I'm the guy who provided people with weed. And that's how I thought that I was liked. I wasn't liked for being me. I was liked for the things that I could do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, that just led into, hanging out with drug dealers. And then it was crack and cocaine. And it just kind of escalated over and over again to the point where I was like on meth. And I just had enough. I was thinking about 20 years old, and my life had gone to crap. And I said, okay, I want to get out of this. And I'd met a girl, and now I'm putting my I'm putting my value on women now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, and I got clean. I got clean by myself for a good 5 years. I didn't do anything for 3 years, and I stopped smoking pot, smokes, booze, everything. And then I introduced marijuana and alcohol back into my life, but in a normal way. I would use maybe once or twice a month. Go out and get drunk with your friends. And I had it quite under control. And then as that relationship fell apart, everything kind of fell apart. I started drinking even more. Then I was starting to do, like ecstasy with people. And then, we ended up breaking up. I ended up going back to my hometown. My hometown's Campbell River on the island.
Okay.
It's kind of a rough little town.
Yep.
There's a lot of drugs there, a lot of alcohol, and just, violence too. I was a scrapper my whole life. That was just part of life, drinking and driving, scrapping, girl. It was a rough, tough town.
Mm-hmm.
And I met a girl that I'd known since high school. She was a cokehead, got back into the coke, into the crack. And then I got in a car crash, which led to heroin addiction. And as soon as that started, it gets hold of you pretty bad. I tried to kick it I don't know how many times, like I couldn't probably count right now. I would go to camp and I would quit and I would come back and just over and over again. Tried going to Sunshine Coast Recovery Center or therapy in Powell River. Only lasted, I think, 3 weeks. I left. And yeah, it just kind of progressed to that. And then I met my son's mom. And we had a son, and I was like, all right, I can do this, right? Like I do this for my son, right? And I got clean, and I got clean for quite a while. I didn't use anything. And then the same thing happened, I wasn't working on myself. I just thought well, I'm clean, I'm sober. That's all I need to do, but not doing the work. So, the relationship started falling apart. I started drinking again. And then she took my son. And then when that happened, I went off the deep end. I ended up in recovery in Vancouver. It's the first time I heard of recovery, which is kind of like sober living.
Okay.
So you're going to live with a bunch of other recovering addicts. You go to meetings and stuff like that. They give you like these work projects that you have to do to help you, be a better person, like the 12 steps and stuff like that. And yeah, it lasted about 35 days. After 35 days, I ended up going with a buddy downtown Vancouver to go help him retrieve something from an ex-girlfriend's house. We ended up in East Van, like right down in the east side. I didn't realize where we were going. He just said, let's go to Vancouver.
Yeah.
I was fine for a bit. And then he ended up taking off. And I'm trying to walk back to the SkyTrain and my brain starts going. And it's like, hey, man, there's drugs right there. And I was like, oh, no. I was like, come on, just a little bit. Oh, no. Oh, okay. And I ended up using. And it lasted for about 2-3 days. I was in full psychosis. I would inject cocaine into my veins, which is not a very wise idea. It messes you up pretty fast. And then I got to the point where I thought I was being filmed in a TV show after walking in on a film in downtown, and I thought they had directed me to a transformer, a substation, and it's right by the Georgia Viaduct there. There's a big substation there, and I ended up getting up over and inside of it, and cop came and told me to get out of there, and I was up on this big structure, and I guess I didn't look, and I jumped, and I landed on a 230,000 volt transformer, and I blew myself up. The transformer luckily blew, and it didn't electrocute me to the point of death, and I burned to 25% of my body, so my whole upper torso is covered in burns. And you think that would stop me from using drugs, but no, I was like literally shooting cocaine in my hospital bed about 2 months later. And I still have my son kind of in my life. I was able to see him. And after, still using, she ended up taking him and said, that's it. You can't see him at all. And I went really deep into the darkness, and I hit the streets. I had a job, I just walked away from it. I walked away from my place, and I literally chose to be homeless. Lasted there for about 4 months. Hated it. I just hate being on the streets. The people, the thievery, the lying. It's a bad place. Got into it's called Pacifica, another treatment center. Again, only lasted about 2 weeks. Got kicked out, and then ended up in another psychosis, and that's where I found God. God came into my life. And I ended up at a place called UGM on East Hastings, which is a recovery place / shelter. Okay. And they got me into a place in Abbotsford called Joshua House, and it's a Christian recovery. And I showed up there, and at that point, I had just accepted Jesus into my heart, and I was just starting to learn all this stuff. And I did really good. I went full Christian. I went super extreme, right?
Yeah.
I was going to church. I was doing all the work. I got scripture on my neck. I know scripture now, man. I love the Bible. And it just still I had issues with it. And then again, I met a girl, and then I ended up with her, and things fell apart, and I ended up back on drugs and back on the street. Another 4 months goes by. And then last April 1st, I was like, that's it, I'm done. And this time something needed to change. So I started really doing a lot more work. I got into more spirituality than religion, reading a lot of more books. And I started microdosing. And I'd used psychedelics most of my life. At a very young age, I tried mushrooms. I lived in Queen Charlotte's, and they just grow wild up there. And then when I was 16, we used to do LSD every weekend because, for $10, you can have a great night instead of, buy $20 worth of booze, right? And we don't wake up with a hangover. So I always knew about them, and I knew that they had that positive, loving sense that they definitely helped you, but I never really used them with an intent of a healing. And this kind of started going onto my radar. So I got a job in camp. I was working up north, and I'd bring in like an ounce of mushrooms with me. And I would just intuitively microdose. I wouldn't wait. I would just like snap a piece off. You know, it looks big enough.
Yeah.
You know, some days I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Some days I'm like, okay, that's nice, right? and it worked. You know, I was listening to spiritual teachers. You know, like I said, Ram Dass, Sadhguru, Moji, all these guys that are like really help you connect to yourself, right? It's like quieting the chatter upstairs. And that really helped, you know. And like I said, I started reading a lot more. I never used to read, you know, like an Archie comic was what I used to read, you know, like, you know, like scrolling through like, you know, stories on Facebook, but I never actually read a book. I think the first book I wrote was actually about Osho, and it was called The Book of Love. And like, it blew my mind what this guy had to say about it. I'm like, that's kind of how I feel with a lot of this stuff. And I never really was able to like have somebody feel the same way and kind of put it into these like elegant words with like all this like, you know, like long spiritual history of it as well too, right? And the Hinduism of how a lot of it works, right? So I got even deeper and deeper into that, and I did a couple flood doses. And one of the flood doses actually takes me back to where I was talking about with the trauma that I had with the sexual abuse as a kid. And that was, I was in a town of like 100, 200 people in a remote town on the coast, like way up north coast, just a little bit down from Kitimat. You can't get there. You can't drive there. You got to get boat or plane, right? And after that happened, I went back there and I thought about it. I'm like, man, like I didn't really have any friends, you know, like I think after that incident happened, because everybody knew, obviously, right? It's a town so small, everybody talks.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was allowed to hang out with a lot of these kids because I just don't remember. I remember only having one family that I was being friends with for quite a while. So I probably had all this negative energy put on to me from these parents and these kids, you know, talking behind my back. And as a kid, you're quite sensitive to those kind of energies. And it damaged me, right? Like it was a lot of trauma because I'm just this innocent little kid. I didn't ask for that to happen to me. And it did, you know, like, yeah, my actions causes, but like it was somebody else's actions that caused that. Well, we look at that like cause and effect, right? And, so I was able to look at, okay, well, that caused that. Well, now I don't have any friends. So now I'm acting out. I'm acting out because I want to be seen. I want to be heard. I want to be involved. And it wasn't happening. So I'd act out more. And that caused my behavior. And then as we moved to different places, my behavior continued, even though that wasn't the situation anymore. I wasn't able to control myself because I was already in that programming, right? So that's what stopped me from having the friends. And that's what led to, you know, like me acting out and then doing drugs to try and fit in. And it all, like, that's the root right there.
Yeah.
And then it's just a domino effect, right? So, yeah.
Man, that's a lot, but it's, that's, I don't, it's, man, it's crazy to hear like the different kind of stages and how many times you can actually just keep going back. But it also, it's awesome how you've like realized that it does go all the way back to the root and that you've like, you know, brought that awareness to like these things that are happening. When you said there about moving, because you like were kind of friendless and then started moving, but you keep doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Did you guys move because of that situation?
Well, I don't really know.
You don't know
for sure.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't though. Like it's like a small town, right? You know, and like, my dad had an opportunity to go and work in Campbell River. You know, a little bit bigger. And we knew Campbell River. My dad grew up there a little bit, right? So it's a familiar town. The camp or the logging place he was going to go work in, my grandpa actually ran it when he was a kid. But yeah, my dad just kind of moved around, always trying to better the family, right? Because he was the only one that worked most of my life. So it was like, I think it was an opportunity maybe for more money is what it was, you know, and you know, there we didn't own the house either, right? Like they gave you the house. You were invited to this town. It was owned by Elcam, like the aluminum foil. And it was actually, they hauled it out a mountain to create a hydroelectric dam. And that was just the people who lived there helped to run that dam. And that was pretty much it. So yeah, he moved down and went back into logging. And then, yeah, we bought a house, and, my dad was just trying to, further the progress of the family type thing. And then my dad worked in a camp a lot when I was a kid, which, didn't help because now I don't have that father figure around, that authoritative figure. And I ran that house, and not in a good way, I was very mischievous, I acted out, I did whatever I want. I learned at a very young age how to manipulate my parents by, saying and doing things that aren't, kosher, and it caused a lot of issues. Right. So, I was literally the poster child for, the troubled youth type thing.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that pulled a shotgun on my babysitter when I was 8 years old because she locked me in my room for misbehaving. Yeah. That kind of stuff. Right. So, yeah, it was nonstop. I can go on and on about all the horrible things that I did. Right. But, my parents did the best they can with what they had, and they did a beautiful job, in all honesty, because my mom is one of the most loving, caring people that I know. And, even when I talked bad about myself, she wouldn't let me. It was if I said something bad, it was all right, now you got to say 5 nice things about you. Same with my brother or sister if we talk to each other like that. So she instilled that into us. That's come through in my older years, right? You don't see it back then. You're just stupid mom, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, she really taught me unconditional love. Both my parents did, right? They raised me right. It was hard for them, and they did things that I obviously would have rather not have had done. But it was also the 80s, 90s, right? So things were a little bit different back then, right? But and then I had to move to Port. So from Camano to Campbell River to Port Hardy to Queen Charlotte, and then back to Campbell River for my youth. And so I moved around. Every time I moved, I was able to reinvent myself. And that's what I said. I would, I moved to Port Hardy and I started hanging out with the bad kids, and then drugs and alcohol became part of it. And then when I moved to Queen Charlotte, I just remember sitting there what are you doing for fun? And I was smoking pot. And they're well, what else? I'm I don't know, smoking pot. That's all I could say. What a loser. Right? There were so many other things I loved to do. I loved going on hikes and biking and kayaking and all these things that all I could say to be cool was smoking pot, right? Because I didn't want to look like this geeky kid, because that's kind of who I was when I was a kid too. I was in Boy Scouts till I was 12 years old. I got made fun of that. For that, right? I succumbed to the peer pressure, right? And, I drew a force warrant. I was in cadets, and I loved nature. I loved, I can survive in nature now because of it. But all these other kids are oh yeah, we're watching MTV and stuff. I'm I'm gonna go build a fort in the, in the woods, guys. Let's go cut some trees down. Let's go biking. Let's build some jumps, right? And that was me, right? So, I didn't really fit into a lot of these other cool kids, and I wanted to be a cool kid, right? A lot of kids did. They want to have friends. They want to feel connected. And I definitely didn't have that.
And so that's where you started to find that would have been with using alcohol and drugs.
Right, because you drink and then people think you're hilarious, and I became that wild crazy guy. I was that guy, the guy that tries to do a backflip off the roof or something like that, I'm gonna drive my bike and go over the truck and I was the crazy guy, I'm the guy that almost broke his collarbone, doing a catwalk into a chain link fence and things like that, right? Yeah, it was, whatever extreme things I could do to make people be whoa, look at Jesse. That's what I would do.
And at that time, in this earlier stages, you didn't see it as a bad thing.
No, obviously
that you were
not,
doing
right?
it. So when did you start to realize that it was an issue?
I still have issues with it, I definitely it's my ego is what it is. My ego likes to be seen, right?
Yeah.
So, and I was not a very good person. No, I wouldn't say that. I was always a good person. I did a lot of bad things most of my life. I was very selfish, self-serving. And I had, obviously I still had a heart, and that did shine through sometimes, but a lot of the stuff that I would lie like crazy, man. I didn't care. Whatever it was to get my way, I would do. Didn't matter what was left in the wake. And it causes all these problems, right? So if you lie, it does catch up to you, right? And it did catch up to me, I did have a career as a chef. I was a chef for 23 years. I started when I was 14 years old in Queen Charlotte's. And I did quite well at that. Like that's the one thing that I did really, really well at. But again, being a chef, as high substance use, right? Like we drink like crazy. Like there's points in my life where I would drink like a 2-6 at work, and still be fully functioning, then go out and drink after that, like hardcore alcoholic. But the alcohol was never like a super huge issue. It was more like this, like, oh, summer I drink more, like a lot of people, right? Like you call it almost like normal alcoholism.
Yeah.
It's not extreme alcoholism where it's like my life wasn't damaged in a sense. Like I'm not losing my job. I'm not losing my place. Relationships definitely were affected by alcohol for me because I would go extreme, like I'm the guy that's just like, oh, I can drink more than everybody. Like I'm so proud of the fact that I could out drink most of the people in the world. I'm like, I can out drink an Irish guy, an English guy, like, I'm always like, oh, I just can't wait to meet a Russian. I want to see if I can out drink them with vodka, like things like what kind of, that's not good to brag, right?
No.
That's just full ego right there. So, and again, I didn't really learn to like, obviously, about ego, but to like actually understand it is another thing. And I've only just like in the last 20 months have like discovered myself, found the right modalities to kind of deal with your ego and like connecting yourself to your center, to your heart, to your spirit, to your soul, to like to just the world, right? Like being able to see people for who they actually are, not for what they do. And again, that's through the spiritual teachings of a lot of these gurus that I follow, and then the books that I read, and then a lot of plant medicine journeys, right? So when I got sober, after I did a couple of those flood doses to solidify my sobriety, I wanted to do Iboga. And Iboga be on my radar for about 4 years. My son's mom actually brought it to me. And there's an alkaloid in there called Ibogaine. And that's like the main alkaloid in there that brings you to that place where you can travel and connect to your soul and stuff like that. But they use it for heroin addicts. And you can taper down off the heroin. You go onto something like morphine like that. That's a little more controlled. And you get down to a level. And then they give you Ibogaine. And it actually pushes all of the opiates out of your opiate receptors, making it so that you don't have like days or weeks of withdrawal. You have it all in one night. It's quite extreme, but it's done in a night.
Yeah.
But also not only that, but you connect to your soul. So your soul's like, this is why you're using. This is why. There's this is the disconnect. Like this is where the trauma was. This is what happens. And you love on that and you connect to that in a different way. And you see it for what it was instead of it controlling you, right? And you release it out of your body because we hold trauma in our body too. So you purge and that comes out of your body and you're releasing it. You become more into your homeostasis, right? Like your natural state, which is a beautiful thing because then things start working a little bit better, right? Your thought patterns are better and you just, man, life gets beautiful. And I was blessed to be able to be in a documentary about it with 5 other participants. And it was just a magical time. We spent 8 days in Costa Rica with some beautiful providers. And they brought us to a very beautiful place with this medicine, and they did it with a thing called the Bawidi tradition. And Bawidi is kind of a way of life in like the Central Africa. In a couple different countries. There's Gabon, Cameroon, and the Congo, but mainly Gabon. And then it's like that medicine there is so sacred that you can't actually take it out of Gabon. It's a sacrament. And these people were trained by a 10th generation Bawidi guy that came to Costa Rica and trained them in the ways of their people, right? And, they go to Africa. They do initiations where you take Iboga for 4 days and you dance and they play music, and you connect and it's pretty intense, and my teacher, Gary Cook, is a beautiful human. He's agreed to mentor me now for becoming a provider myself too, because after everything that I've gone through, I'm able to have this like beautiful perspective and empathy with these people, especially addicts that are struggling. And through my struggles, I can now help people through theirs. And I just think it'll be amazing to be able to work with Iboga. Me and Iboga now have a beautiful relationship. Like I took my microdose this morning and, it helps me connect to myself and it just makes me see things, like in a more of an ego assisted life than an egocentric life. Right. It's just beautiful medicine.
um, with that stuff, like, how did you get into like the documentary and that opportunity? Like, because it's kind of, like I know a lot of people that will go on these plant medicine retreats or go do an 8-day thing. But how did that become integrated with the documentary, and like how did that all come up, and you be the one to go there and experience that?
It's funny because it's all part of my path when I look at it, right? Like you see it and you're like, oh, yeah, okay, right? But so what happened is the Dose documentary came out. I don't know if you've seen that.
No.
So Dose is a documentary filmed here in Vancouver about one girl that has struggled with addiction with heroin. And they start by giving her microdoses with mushrooms, and then they give her a couple flood doses with mushrooms.
What's a flood dose?
So like a flood dose is like a larger dose,
okay.
right? So a macro dose, right? So, and she gets some benefit out of it, but like mushrooms are very beneficial, but for someone that's got deep trauma, sometimes you need a little bit more, or like super high doses. Excuse me. Especially with somebody that's trained properly, and they didn't really have anyone that was trained properly. They're just like these film documentary guys. They're like, oh yeah, we think this will help you and you should try it. And she wanted to, and it wasn't quite doing, she's going back and forth and oh yeah, let's do better. Oh, and then you go, and that's what happens, right? Like that's part of the path, right? Like I tell a lot of people, like if you're going to get sober, relapse and slips and all these things are part of recovery, because you do that when you hopefully learn every time that happens, right? You usually don't get it on the first time. I think it's like 1% of people get it on the first time, right? The typical amount of times it takes a heroin addict to get sober is 11. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
That's a lot.
Right? It took me 7 times in recovery. And I tried way more than the 7. I tried by myself too.
Right.
But and then they were talking to these other people, and they had a book, because they have Iboga here in Canada. Canada, it's legal. Iboga is legal. Ibogaine is now class 4, which is what they were providing. And there's a place called Iboga Soul, and there's a guy named Mark Howard, and that's what he does, is he works with addicts. And so she goes in there and she does Iboga, and yeah, she's been clean for, I guess, I don't know, like 3 years now, something like that. And my girlfriend at the time was like, oh, there's this Dose documentary. Do you want to go see it? And I was like, yeah, sure. Awesome. She sent me the info and bought the tickets. And I was like, sweet. So I'm checking out the website. And that's when it dawned on me, because I was like, like I've been sober for, I forget what it was now. It was like maybe like 6 months when she sent me this. And it dawned on me. And I'm like, okay, the mushrooms have been doing really good work with me. I'm like, but I know what this medicine is going to do because I've researched it before. I'm like, it's on my radar again. I'm like, yeah, I want to do this. I'm working in camp. I got the money to do this, but I didn't want to do it through Iboga Soul because it's Ibogaine. And I'm like, I wasn't an addict anymore. I didn't need 30 days in treatment, right? And that's what that program is, like a 30-day program. I'm like, well, maybe I can find something a little bit less. And so there's this little click thing on the website, and it was Iboga Wellness Center. And I just clicked on it, and I was like, oh, cool. All right, cool. Yeah, no, this place. I'm like, Costa Rica? Yeah. I'm like, I love Costa Rica. I've been there before. I'm like, yeah, let's do this, right? So, and like the price was pretty much the exact same. Like obviously 8 days instead of 30, but it was about the same. And I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, I want to do this. So I got in contact with a guy named Levi down there. He was the one that manages the facility. And yeah, we started talking, and I was like, yeah, definitely want to do it. He's like, well, do you have any dates? And I was like, yeah, I was thinking like January. He's like, okay, well, take a look at them again and let me know. And I went and looked again, and there was one in December 13th. And it was like, discount. I'm like, I like discounts. Like, who doesn't like not spending money, right? Yeah. So I was like, all right. I'm like, what's this about? They're like, oh, well, we're filming a documentary down there. And I'd actually been on live TV several months before that for the Hometown Heroes Burn Foundation. And I'd been in like the newspaper. I was on breakfast television. I was on CTV morning news, like the national, and talking about that, right? I was like, oh, well, I'm like, I really want to be able to have a voice for addicts about these medicines and like how you can get better. This is perfect opportunity. So I applied, I sent them all of my clips and a little write-up about myself. And they're like, yeah, we definitely want you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, December 13th, I started my journey, and we're down there for 8 days. And yeah, man, just magic down there happened. Connected with every single person down there, like all the providers. One of the providers is actually from here, and she runs a center here too. So they have an Iboga center. And it's just a beautiful, amazing thing that I've been able to connect with these people. And Iboga's come back with me here, Whereas I think a lot of people have an issue because like they leave and they don't have that kind of support. I've been very blessed because I have that support. I've actually done Iboga twice here in Canada since then.
Okay.
It's in a different setting. We do it silent here, or at least the one that they do here is silent. So you take it and you're silent, like a Vipassana for like 24 hours, and you just go inside. And man, I've had some like beautiful insights, just beautiful insights there, and being able to connect with my provider and her husband. They just had a baby. Like I'm Uncle Jesse now to this baby, right?
Yeah.
And it's just amazing, which has led me into some other plant medicine circles. And I'm just like building that soul tribe, man, of people that understand me, that have been there, that have done the work, that are doing the work and are helping guide me. So, you know, I got like one of my best girlfriends now is a cacao ceremony master, right? And, you know, like I just met a beautiful human the other day that does Campbell. I ended up doing Campbell Warrior initiation on Friday. Where they do, so Campbell is called the monkey tree frog, and they take it and they string it up, and he secretes a venom, like a waxy venom, and they scrape it off, and then they let the tree frog go, and then they burn you, and they have like a little round dot on you, and then they put the venom on you, and then it goes into your system, and you're like, you feel it, but like it takes you right into the present, like your ego is gone for a very short period of time, but like for you, your higher self starts talking to you, and it gives you the information that you need to hear. The first one that I did was beautiful because on my third round, I was sitting there and I just started crying and crying. I cried for probably about like 20, 30 minutes, like bawling, and that was my purge. And this voice came over me, and I always thought that suffering was this beneficial thing, and that everyone should suffer, and that suffering builds character, and and it's kind of true in a sense, but at the same time, it's not, because the voice was like, Jesse, like, you know all that suffering that you think you went through? And I was like, yeah. And it's like, it wasn't suffering. And I was like, wait, what? It's like, it wasn't suffering at all. I'm like, what do you mean? And it's like, well, that was all just training for everything that's about to happen. You had to go through that. It wasn't suffering. It's what you needed to go through. It's like going to school is suffering, right? Like, no, you're just training for what you need to do, right? And I was like, oh, and I started laughing, and I'm like crying and laughing and having a good time. And like the last time I did it on Friday, the voice started talking to me. I was like, don't ignore that deep inner voice. Because I have this deep inner voice sometimes with things, and it's like, it's getting louder and louder as I'm going forward. And it's getting to the point where it's like, I really can't ignore it, or it just things start going bad for me, right? And it was like, listen, sit silent. You are your best guide, and you know what you have to do. And it's so true, right? Because I'm like, I do know exactly what I have to do, and I'm doing it now. I broke up with my girlfriend like literally like a few days later because my son's mom and me have a very close relationship. I still love her. She still loves me. I've told my girlfriend that. I'm like, yeah, if my son's mom ever wants me back, I will probably leave you, just to be honest with her. And she was okay with that, but I think on like a deep level, she wasn't. So I just had to be like really true to my purpose and myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like nonstop. And it's great because after I did the Iboga, I was using mushrooms and DMT and things like that, you know, still continuing that. And in a mushroom journey, I got gifted the idea of the microdosing company because like, again, it'd been on my radar from doing it myself, and I wanted other people to benefit from that. And like, it was weeks before that, and I saw like on Instagram, I'm like, there's microdoses. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, people are selling mushrooms on Instagram, because I'd only just gotten Instagram like just over a year ago.
Okay.
Right. So I'm like, whoa, I'm like, people selling drugs on what? Like, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, okay, well, I want to do something a little bit different. So like the one thing about my microdosing company is I use a lot of different herbs and vitamins and superfoods. Like I use medical mushrooms from, you know, Pirica with Finn, right? Like that's how we connected.
Okay.
Right. So he's my mushroom guy for the medical mushrooms, you know, and I love their products. They're great products. And then I got like all sorts of different things. I use like moringa in there. I use like niacin, you know, magnesium biglycinate. Like I put all these different things in there. So I came out with 4 different blends. I got one in Witch Harmony, and that's based off Paul Stamets. So Paul Stamets is like one of the world's best mycologists, and he's got the Statement stack, he calls it. And that's lion's mane, psilocybin, and niacin. And so the psilocybin, it's a nootropic, right? And the lion's mane, same thing. Like these are literally helping build brain cells, repair brain cells, giving you better cognitive functioning, reaction time, like memory recall, all these beautiful aspects of it. And then you got the niacin. Niacin is B3, and use the flush stuff. There's flush and stuff that's non-flush, but the flush stuff literally opens up your capillaries. So if you take a large dose of stuff, like a good 100 to 500 milligrams on like an empty stomach, your whole body goes red and you can feel yourself flushing, right? So it works similarly like that. Obviously, if you eat and drink a bunch of water, it minimizes it, but it's a delivery system. So you're delivering more of this medicine deeper into your brain, passing the blood-brain barrier, but also to extremities where a lot of things happen in your neurons, right? And then, so I'm like, I went one step further because like a chaga is like super high antioxidant, and moringa is like, I think it's got 96 of the essential minerals and vitamins that our bodies need out of the 108, something like that, right? And so I've been adding things so I'm doing a little bit more than the regular guys.
Yeah.
And then I got like a brain blend that's focused like simply on brain nootropics, so it's got ginkgo, it's got lion's mane, it's got acetylcarnitine, which is an amino acid that helps your brain cells actually connect to it or send energy, I guess you say, to each other. I have the Psychonaut Blend, which is more of like a Scooby snack for people. So that's like a recreational thing. So like, for people who don't want to drink and you're going to go into a social situation, you just take one of those. You're not going to be all buggered up, but you're going to have a good time. It might help you open up because some people have like social anxiety and things like that. So it's a bit more of a recreational thing, and you can take one or two, right, and enjoy yourself. And then we have the 6 mushroom blend, which is like all the medical mushrooms that Pirka has, plus the psilocybin. So we got turkey tail, cordyceps, red reishi, lion's mane, and chaga. And I'm about to launch 4 more when the website launches. And we're going to have a moontime blend for the ladies. So it's actually going to be something called a nano dose, which I'm trying to coin now, because when we look at dosing, it's usually just micro and macro. But I believe that there are some subsections in there for people, right? Because the nano, I find, is like the 25 milligrams to 100 milligrams, and you're not going to feel that at all. It's super subperceptual. And then you get into the micro, and so the micro for me is the 100 to 500. So now you're going to start possibly feeling it, but you're still going to be able to function, right? And then the next one I'm trying to coin is called the mini dose. So it's not quite a macro, and it's not a micro, it's a mini. So that's the 0.5 to 2 grams. So you're going to definitely feel it, but you're not going to be super buggered up too. Obviously it depends on the person too, because some people are more sensitive than others, but that's more for like, using if you're like, going like to the movies or something like that. So you're not going to be like, whoa, and you can enjoy yourself. And then, we're getting into the macros, and then we're like hero doses, the mystical dose, and then the God dose, which is like, like you're looking at super high doses, like 14 to 28 grams. So that's when you're, full transcendence. You're going to possibly leave your body and earth and possibly talk to some entities and things like that. Right. But it's a beautiful medicine. We also going to have a heart blend. So it's based, all these medicines work on your heart. That one on the Lucid Dream blend. So this one again is another nano dose. And we'll be having stuff like melatonin, passion flower, hops, valerian root. So it's going to put you to sleep, and it'll have such a small dose of psilocybin that it won't keep you awake, but it'll just help induce those beautiful lucid dreams, right? Or vivid dreams, right? And we got a couple different things. I'm working with another company that does extracts. Okay. So they actually pull the psilocybin out of the mushrooms. So now you don't have that organic material. So a lot of people have the issues with their stomachs, and that's because of the organic material. So it'll just have the 3 alkaloids, the biotin, the psilocybin, and the psilocin. And so you have a much cleaner experience. So people who do want to do higher doses and do have that stomach issue, they can take something like that. And we'll have some gummies too,
Oh, yeah. Why not?
You gotta sell gummies, right? So eventually we're gonna have like an actual trusted partner site, because to me, mushrooms is all about connection, right? Because we literally look at mushrooms and the mycelium. The mycelium connects the forest together, right? It's literally how plants talk to each other. They actually send information through each other. So it's really about connection. So that's why when you do mushrooms, you feel connected to people. You feel connected to nature. You feel connected to yourself. It's all about connection. So I don't want to be in competition with people. I don't think it's healthy to be in competition with people. I want to align with the people. I'm here to help people. You know, like we can all benefit from this. You know, I'm not looking to be a millionaire from this. I really not. I don't want $1 million. I honestly don't. I think it would be very damaging to me. I can like make money and put it towards things, but I don't want to have a bunch of, you know, disposable income. I think disposable income is like a silly word and a silly concept. Like if you can dispose of your income, then you should be giving it to people that need it. Right. So, and eventually I'm going down to Costa Rica to do the training, like I said. And with the company, I just want to sell it to, you know, produce some money to be able to provide for myself and my family when I go down there, to work on the Iboga training and to open up a center of my own, which is, you know, the dream of opening up my own wellness center and be able to help other addicts. Cause again, that's my big passion.
Yeah. Yeah. So your long-term plan is actually, to make an exit with the company and then go down there and finish your training and create a wellness center.
Yeah, and I'll keep a share in the company. Obviously, I'm not gonna sell it all. I'll keep a little bit, so I get like almost like that royalties for doing it all. Yeah, which will be nice because it'll be like, you know, a comfort thing. Because now I can travel around the world and provide to people, which is, you know, the ultimate dream. And while I'm doing that, I can keep saving money, and again, that'll be over here. I'll probably get an account, like, you know, like this is what my goal is and this is what I want to buy, and you let me know when I get there and we'll buy it. Otherwise I don't want to know how much money is there. You know, you know, like, unless it's an emergency, I don't need it, right? Like I can provide for myself without that kind of revenue. Right.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And like, it seems like you obviously know a lot about mushrooms
just a little bit.
And all these things. So I'm sure whoever would be a buyer or purchaser and it would still want you a part of the company. I like the vision behind it and all the different things that you're creating with it. I mean, and it's funny too, because recently I've had a lot of people asking about microdosing mushrooms, and it's something that I literally know nothing about. I've never tried it. But it's been coming up, like it's been just showing up a lot in my life lately, where like even the guest before you last week, he was talking about, he's like, oh, if you ever want like help being guided through it, you should reach out. And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. And like, it just keeps showing up. And then you today. So I'm like, okay, I don't know. It's just like one of those things. I'm like, all right, I think I have to try this soon. But yeah, I think that's awesome. And I'm glad that now I have a place that I can send these people to get these things, to try it out. And I love that it's local as well. And right now, how are you selling it? Like, is it through Instagram?
Instagram, yeah. And then I got a lot of word of mouth at the moment.
Okay.
Right? But like another part of the website too is we will be selling just whole dried mushrooms as well too.
Okay. So
I'm going to have 14 different varieties on there. Of the Kubenzis. So, you know, different potencies, different rarities, and each mushroom has a little bit of a different spirit, right? They just hold a little bit something different in there. So there'll be something for everybody on there. And then, yeah, like a lot of just information too. Like, so like all the stuff I was talking about, nanodose, I'm going to have that all written out there.
Nice.
How to microdose. Another thing is like, there's 2 different protocols usually people recommend. That's the statement protocol, which is 5 days on and 2 days off.
Okay.
And there's the Feynman protocol, which is James Feynman. He's the one who wrote the psychedelic experience guidebook, I think it's called, or handbook, whatever it is.
Okay.
And his is 1 day on and 3 days off. And if you look at that, like statements is really cool. It's based off like the neurogenesis. Like I said, so you want to do that long term. And again, it helps with your brain. Feynman is more performance based, so you're not getting as much out of it. And I found with statements, it was a little bit too much. I found the 5 days. And the 2 days in between wasn't quite enough of a reset. And obviously Feynman's is this, I just wasn't getting enough out of it.
Okay.
So I created my own. So I would like to, again, coin the other thing is the silo care protocol, which is 4 days on and 3 days off. And it's kind of like that sweet spot right in the middle. So you're not building up as much as a tolerance over 4 days, and you're giving yourself a little bit more of a reset in between.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're going to put all the protocols on there. So it's really what you want. I also tell people, like, you can make your own protocol if you want, right? Like, there's no like one way to do it. It's like cooking, right? Like, there's more than one way to crack an egg. So like, you want to go 2 days on, 2 days off, go for it. 1 day on, 1 day off, go for it, right? Like, it's all about you. And then also teaching people how to like properly find their right microdose, because technically not everyone's going to be the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
Body weight tolerance, chemical makeup, diet,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
Everything.
So what you want to do for like a proper one is you just keep adding a little bit more until you feel it, and you actually go back so you don't feel it. And that's the sweet spot. And a lot of people, it's funny because they come to me and they're like, well, I don't feel anything. And I'm like, well, it's a microdose. You're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of the point. I'm like, did you have a good day? They're like, yeah, actually I had a really good day. I wasn't stressed. And I'm like, then it's working.
Yeah.
Like that's what microdosing is about. You're not supposed to be like, ooh, you know, like, and like, that's what you want. And then, you know, take a little bit more. Like, I provide like the 250 milligram pure capsules, which is, again, it's a little bit of a higher microdose. And again, with the Psychonaut, like, you can take those, but then you're not getting the benefit of all the other constituents inside there, right? So depending on what you're looking for, right? So I like having those other things in there because they kind of work well together, and you're getting like health benefits. You know, like I take my own blend now, minus the psilocybin, because I don't take a lot of psilocybin all the time. I do more like a flood dose, like at least once a month, usually on the full moon, to really connect to myself. And then every once in a while, maybe between, I'll like try a product. It was getting kind of ridiculous for a bit there. I almost want to find just a tester to be like,
get someone else to kind of try them out.
Yeah, and like when I did Campbell, I'm not touching anything for a bit here now.
Yeah,
and I'm on a microdose schedule for Iboga for a bit here to like just connect with the medicine again. And so, yeah, it's really like knowing yourself too, right? And taking breaks is a really good thing, you know, because now it's like, well, we're relying on this. Like, is the only reason I'm like this because of this, or is it because of me? And so, like, a lot of the guidance that I give people too is like how to properly microdose. You can't just take a microdose and be like, oh, my life's going to get better, right? Like, there's no such thing as a magic pill, right? You need to do the work, right? The microdose helps you connect to the work you have to do. So it's about setting intentions. Like, okay, well, what is your intention with microdosing? Oh, I have anxiety, I have depression, I'm a procrastinator, you know, my relationship's not doing good, I'm an angry, whatever it is, that's what you need to work on. And by thinking about that, that's how the mushrooms work, right? Because it works off of the 5-HT2 receptors, which is your serotonin, right? And what that does is it creates global connectivity and helps to bypass a lot of those networks that are like your auto response. It's your default mode network. So your higher memory is what causes you to react sometimes, because that's just what your programming is. But it kind of bypasses. So you're about to be like, ah! And you're like, oh wait, like, I don't need to react like that. You know, like, my favorite example is like when you're driving in a car, somebody cuts you off. Most people's reaction is like, ah, but I'm like, why? Why do that? It doesn't really make sense if you ask me, because you're getting yourself all worked up. You're now releasing cortisol in your body, which is a stress hormone. You're making yourself feel bad just because that guy cut you off. He doesn't care. You know, like, you're not actually like hurting him, or he's not wising up because you got angry. The only person you're hurting is yourself by doing that. So with these kind of medicines, you kind of notice that, and you'll be like, well, you know what? That actually doesn't matter. And I don't need to react like that because it's not healthy for me. And I'm like, I'd rather be happy. And so I've learned to a point where it's like nothing in this world takes away my happiness except for me. Right? Like, it's true. People are like, oh, you made me feel like that. I'm like, no, actually it didn't. My actions didn't make you feel like that. It's your reaction to my actions. What you should do is be like, I don't accept this. I have a boundary. I won't put up with this. And if this keeps happening, then I'm going to leave. And then you're going to be a happy person instead of just reacting all the time to all the things that keep happening to you, right? So you end up changing who you are on a deep level. And that's part of the integration. So once you realize these things, it's about putting them into work. So there was a great analogy I learned actually in Christian recovery called the aha. So the aha is epiphany for the A. So that's realizing something. You're like, oh yeah, no, that's how things are. And that I shouldn't be like that. And the second is H. So that's being honest. So be honest with yourself is like telling yourself the truth about the situations. But the last one is the most important. That's the action. Because you can have the first two and then just fizzle away. And that's some of these plant medicines. That's what happens to people is they go in there and they get such beautiful introspective work done and insights and like, whoa, I understand. And then they just go back to their normal life and they don't listen to what their guidance was, you know, like a lot of these paths are quite difficult because they're going to tell you to do difficult things. Leave your partner. You know, the friends that you have are not good for you. The family that you're hanging around with aren't good for you. You know, the job that you're in isn't good for you. And a lot of these things are going to come up and it's hard to walk away from that stuff because we're programmed into attachment, right? We're like, oh, well, that's part of my identity. And you almost feel like you're dying when you leave these things because that's who you are. That's who you think you are, right? And then, it takes a lot. And a lot of people have a lot of troubles with that. I've seen people that do a lot of plant medicines and they're still stuck.
Yeah.
You know, they've done, they're like, oh, I've done ayahuasca like 10 times. I'm like, then why are you snorting cocaine? Like, I'm pretty sure your soul's not saying, oh yeah, cocaine's cool. You know, like, so, and some people just won't wake up. Right. And yeah, you can't force anyone to wake up. You know, they'll wake up when they're ready to wake up. Right. And they can do plant medicines over and over and over again, but they need to be ready.
Yeah.
They really need to be ready, right? To do the work. And yeah, without the work, you're just going to be stuck.
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight with the action piece there, because I mean, I just kind of see that with everything. It's people are always kind of like maybe looking for a quick fix, or even like with the microdosing, I feel like a lot of people that reach out, they go to it because it's something they can quickly consume. But I think what's great is that at least it offers, at least those things offer an insight. I think more so than like a pharmaceutical. You're obviously not going to get anything spiritual out of that. At least you have the opportunity to get something and take action. So it's giving you the first two sometimes. So
yeah, I always tell people, I'm like, if you're going to abuse something, abuse mushrooms, because like they're non-habit forming. They don't do anything harsh to your body. The one thing that could happen is psychotic break. And it doesn't happen very often. You have to be in like a really bad setting or have some pre-existing conditions for that kind of stuff to happen, and do like super large doses too. Like the chances of having a psychotic break off a microdose are like next to none, right?
Yeah.
Like again, you'd have to have like a precondition, right? But yeah, it's yeah, like I said, like people who drink, you know, socially, I'm like, that's abuse right there. You know, like, and alcohol is horrible for you, like super horrible for you.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, if you're gonna go out and have some fun, yeah, do mushrooms. I'm like, if you're gonna recreationally do mushrooms all the time, sure, go ahead, right? Like you're not gonna hurt yourself. Like the mushrooms aren't going to hurt yourself. You might hurt yourself being silly, but you know, that's not directly related, you know? No. So yeah, like, and they've been around for thousands and thousands of years, right? Like this is something that's not new. And then if you want to go deep into that, you know, we look at like, it was caused by the church and things like that, because when you do these mushrooms, you get insight into like what God actually is, and like how God works, and that you are God, and that you're the universe in the form, like you're the formless in form right now, and that we are all the same. We all come from the same thing, and that none of us are different. We just have different programmings and different paths, right? So if you can get to that point where you look at everybody as yourself on a different path, then you can forgive people a lot easier, right? And you don't get angry at people, and yeah, it makes life a lot easier for you, right? Because you're not judging people on what they're doing as good or bad. Like obviously we have to judge people, but we only judge people on how they benefit us, right? So like, oh, are your actions, you know, healthy for me? No, well then I got to leave you. And that's a judgment, but it's called a healthy judgment, right? And you start changing your talk, because you look at the world and man, like, so many people that I'm around, they're self-deprecating when they talk, like, oh, what an idiot, and oh, like I'm worthless, and it's like you hear that a lot, and man, your soul just groans when that happens. It's damaging to you. Your body's listening to you. Your soul is listening to those words that are coming out of your mouth, and the ego doesn't realize what it's doing. until you have that awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just raising awareness, raising vibration, and yeah, really tuning into the proper path to go down, right? Because man, we got so many options, and it's hard out there, man. It really is. I still get stuck in a lot of things, right? So
Yeah,
it's only been 20 months for me, and learning how to do stuff like manifestation too, and that's the whole thing with like the whole positive mindset, right? As above, so below, right? If you're thinking positive things all the time, positive things start happening to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can make things happen just with the power of thought, but it's hard to actually get there, because I went 37 years and people would always talk about it, and I always kind of understood, but I never quite got it. It didn't click.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about like the book The Secret, and things like that, and that's literally what they're talking about, right? It's like manifestation. And once it clicks, man, it's beautiful how it flows, right? And you don't fight things, you surrender. You're like, okay, well, if this isn't working, and then it isn't working, I'm not going to push it, I'm not going to force it. And then it's like, oh, well, okay, well, now this path is here because I've chosen not to try to go down this hard path. You're like, oh, wow, look at that one's wide open and it's super easy to go down.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, this is so much enjoyable, and I'm getting to the same place, kind of.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a much better way of life, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. And like the benefits that I've reaped just in the last 20 months, like, my son, I didn't see him for 3 years because of my addiction. And that was really hard, and that really helped me to surrender and accept things for where they were. Like, because acceptance is a big thing too, right? Like, we just need to accept that this is the way that things are, and kind of love on it, right? Like, if you look at my knuckles, it says amor fati, and that means love your fate. So no matter what happens, if it's good, bad, or ugly, you gotta love it.
Mm-hmm.
You might not necessarily to like it, but you gotta love it, right? and then you get to that beautiful point where life. I was torturing myself, constantly thinking about like when I would see him and how all this and that, and I'm like, well, no, it's gonna happen when it's gonna happen. What's the point of trying to live in the future if it hasn't happened yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I got to a good point, and just not this last weekend, but the weekend before, I was able to see my son and be reconnected with him and be a part of his life. And to me, that was like the ultimate goal. Like, for me in the last 3 years, is to be a good father for him. And I left it up to his mom to kind of decide, and we've been gotten closer, and like all the positives are just never ending. And the fact that I'm able to help people now, and that like giving to me has become a beautiful thing, like being of service, giving my time, my money, my energy to people that need it, has become so rewarding. And like, that's what fills me with joy now, instead of like taking, which is what I used to always do, right? It was like, what can I get from people? And now it's like, what can I give to people?
Yeah.
So it's great, right?
Yeah, it's an awesome switch to make.
Yeah.
Not easy.
Yeah. It's living heart-centered is what it is, instead of ego-centered, right? And it's a hard switch, man. It's really hard, because like, man, that's what we do most of our life, is building that identity up, that ego up, right? And we got to look at it. It's like, it's not our fault, man. Like, we're programmed a certain way. Like, like, you're born into that family. You didn't really, some people say you could choose it, right? Like, it depends how deep we want to go into this conversation. Yeah. But yeah, like you got into that situation, and then they programmed you. And that program was passed down from them. So that's what they talk about, is that generational trauma. So, and that comes through, man. And you can't help that stuff. What you can do is you can heal from it, though. And you can stop it from being passed on. That's the only thing you do. You can't help that programming, right? No. It's over, it's done. But you have a responsibility to try and do something about it now. And that's where the work comes in, right? And it's like forgiving them and seeing like, hey, they did the best that they could, even if they were horrible to you. That's probably because they had a horrible childhood too, or even a horrible adulthood. Like, look at them for that. Like, they're just pure souls that have been programmed to do these evil things. I don't think anyone's truly evil. Right? No. I just think they were programmed to. It's like a robot, man. Like, I'm going to tell you to go destroy this building. Oh, okay, well, you can't. What, are you going to blame the robot for doing that, or the guy that did that? Right? And then it just goes back and back and back and back. So we forgive, and we clear that ancestral trauma, and then we work on it. And then, like, my son, I can't wait, like, because I'm so happy that I am the person I am today, because the person who I was when I was with him probably would have programmed him pretty badly, you know, and I'm glad that I wasn't there for the last 3 years, because I was in a dark place, you know, and now I'm able to talk to him and show him and teach him what I think is at least the right ways now. And I'm still going to do messed up things probably, and probably program him some weird ways, but he's on a path now where like, it'll be easier, I think, for him than it would have been if I was still in his life, which is a beautiful thing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Waiting till the right time.
Yeah. Plus, he's gonna have a plant medicine dad, so you know he's gonna have a couple journeys, I'm sure, when he gets a little bit older. You know, if he chooses so.
How old is he now?
He's 5. He'll be 6 in February.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so you are in touch with him now?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. I gotta go. I'm going there on Friday to see him again for the second time. Been talking to him on the phone, and yeah, it's good. You know, it was a rough day though, because like he didn't recognize me, didn't know quite who I was, even though Mama had talked to him about it, and yeah, it was rough, but it was fine. You know, at the same time, because I'm like, I was just happy to see him.
Yeah,
and he got really close to me, like really fast, and his mom was like, you know, he's not usually like this with people. Like he's definitely like. He knows a little bit.
I feel like they can feel it.
Well, like intrinsically, like deep down, and he was sitting on my lap, and like I kept like kissing him on the nose, and he would lick my cheek, you know.
Yeah.
And we were having fun, and like towards the end of the day, he kept saying, "Hey, you," and I was like, "Hey, I was like, you can just say Jesse, or you can call me Dad." And he kind of was like I didn't think he quite understood still.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I like the name Jesse." I was like, "Okay." And then when we got to the hotel, he was like saying something about his dad, because his mom has a partner right now.
Okay.
And his mom was like, "Well, for like, remember when I was talking about how this morning we're gonna see your dad and it's your real dad?" And he's like, "No," like he just didn't remember, right?
Yeah.
So I looked and I was like, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And he's like, "No." I'm like, "Well, I'm your real dad." And then I had a conversation about how like me and his mom were the ones who made him, and how like the dad that you have now, though I love him and like respect him, he's not your real dad, not your blood dad. He's still your dad, but he's not your real dad. Like, I'm your biological father. And he's like, "Oh," I'm like, "That's why Oma and Opa are my mom and dad, and your aunt is my sister." And he's like, "Oh," and then he clicked, right?
Yeah.
And we went upstairs and had like, I guess 2 king size beds, and he's jumping back and forth. And he's like, "Dad, Dad, Dad." And I was like, "Oh," you know? So he got it finally. And
Yeah.
so like, and he's just a beautiful little guy, and it's so blessed to be able to be back in his life, and yeah, to be the person I am now. And it's great because even with his mom, like I'm able to be more of a support to her now than I ever was, because I can actually like sit and listen to people instead of always trying to control the situation and, you know, fix the situation and put my opinion on everything that's said. You know, I can just sit there and, you know, just listen and hold space for people. And then when I do talk, I talk from my heart instead of my ego. And, you know, it's made all my relationships a lot better.
Yeah, I think, well, not many people can really, I think listening's a lost art nowadays, and being able to do that and not trying to be forcing with her too, right? You're just letting the time come. And I think that obviously all of that just makes it so much nicer for her and your son and everybody. Yeah. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I've become a master of flow now. People like make plans and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry." I'm like, "Don't say sorry. It's cool. I'm enjoying myself."
Yeah.
I think it was Eckhart Tolle was talking about, if somebody comes up and you've been waiting for them and they say, "Sorry that you've been waiting," say, "Oh, I wasn't waiting. I was just enjoying being." And that's a beautiful thing to me, because like I'll just like, I'm never like waiting for people. I'm like, I'm always just doing something, whether it be in my head or on my phone. I'm like looking just out and enjoying. I'm experiencing. I'm not waiting. I'm experiencing. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to get to the point. And it's like, it's so funny how the words that we use can kind of trap us, right? And they kind of hold us in this like bit of a prison, right? And words are powerful, right? So it's interesting, like, "Oh, I should have done that." Well, no, you shouldn't have. I'm like, because if you should have, then you would have, right? So when Gary says, "No, you can't go back and change it," it's like, so stop thinking about it. Like, you can't change it. Like, you know, you can go back in the past and be like, "That was awesome," but like, don't be like holding on like, "Well, I could have done this." I'm like, well, you couldn't have, because you would have. You know, like you say, like, in the future, I'm gonna do better. That's what you say. I want to do better. Not, oh, I could have. I want to do better. Yeah. So it's all about reprogramming yourself, and it takes a lot, man. It does take a lot.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's just consistent work, like all the time. Just more awareness.
But it's nice because, like I said, psychedelics are having a renaissance right now. And it's like, man, the more deeper I go, you can see like psychedelics have this like it's a rise and a fall, right? It's a bit of the Hermetic teachings, right? The rhythm of the world, like everything has a rise and a fall. And right now they're coming back because the world is damaged. We're not in the right headspace. We are destroying this earth. We're destroying the animals. We're destroying ourselves, our health. We're greedy, and yeah, something's got to change, and it needs to change like pretty darn quick, or we're not going to make it past there's only we're going to be like hiding in bunkers. It's going to get bad, so there needs to be a huge shift. And the nice thing about the psychedelics is that brings us back to connection, where we actually care about these things, right? And we start realizing the impact of our actions, even on small things, right? Like the type of food that you're eating, right? Like I learned about vibrations in one of my in one of my plant ceremonies, and the medicine was talking about how the medicines that we take tune us in at this high frequency, which allows us to see past this realm, right? To see, like, because our eyes only have a spectrum of like this out of this, right? And hearing and all these things, we're able to see a bit more. And you can't describe it when you come back here because we have no reference for it, right? It's like it's like a 2D being trying to describe a 3D world to another 2D being. Well, there is no up and down, so how are they going to say up and down if there's no up and down? So it's hard to explain. But what that does is now that they're coming back and they're becoming more popular, we got places like Oakland, Santa Fe, Ann Arbor, and DC that have decriminalized all plant medicines. We got Oregon that decriminalized all drugs and legalized psilocybin for therapeutic uses. In Canada, we've had 4 people on end-life therapy being approved with a Section 56(1) exemption stating that they were allowed to use psilocybin for end-of-life therapy. And then on November 5th, they had a lady in BC that was approved to use it for depression. That's the first person for depression in Canada, which is a huge deal. So this is happening. We have different companies like Neon Mind is one of them that are doing research at UBC. There's a couple other ones that are doing it, and they're getting licenses now to produce psilocybin for research purposes. And the next step is allowing these people to have medical scripts from doctors, like what happened with marijuana. That was the first step. You can get a medical license to grow marijuana, and then you can get a medical license to consume it. So that's how we're going to connect it at first. And then it'll kind of do that. There's a lot of parallels with the mushrooms and the marijuana, and it's kind of going on the same track. Might be a little bit faster than marijuana just because you got to go through it. So we can kind of mimic a lot of these laws, just use mushrooms instead of the terminology of marijuana or whatever they're using for the terminology, right? But it's very similar, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to become a lot more available. And that's kind of like, I would love for my company to be something like that, right? So it's something that you can use and it's approved. I have a legal grower, so I don't have to worry about getting busted, and a legal facility, and I don't have to worry about that again. But whatever it might be. But like, this is medicine. Like, and one thing about our company too is like, when we make all our stuff, like we smudge it all. So I use either Palo Santo or sage or something like that. We get it all set up, and then we smudge it. And when we smudge it, we speak prayers over that stuff. We set intention into our medicine. We're not just like, oh, we're going to make these caps. Here you go. Like we're actually putting, like protection spells on this, like healing, asking for our ancestors to be there. We're thanking Mother Earth. We're thanking the mushrooms for providing this stuff for us, for giving us these insights. And then we send it on its way with those intentions so that the people actually getting the benefits, like truly getting the benefits, because that's energy connected to that. And like, a lot of people don't believe in it, but it's a real thing once you see it, right? So it's that's what we're about. Like our motto is healing over profits. Like, like if someone came to me and they're like, hey man, I don't have very much money, I want a microdose, I'd be like, yeah, well, what do you got? It can be a sliding scale. I'd rather you have someone to help you heal, because that's going to go out and help the world, right? So,
I think that's amazing. I mean, it's definitely that's a great approach. You're putting your heart and everything you know into it. It's not just like, yeah, you don't really care much about the money. And
No.
I think that's important right now. So
Yeah. Like money is beneficial, but it's definitely not needed,
No.
right? Like I don't need money. Like there's things that I need. I need shelter, you know, and money helps me get shelter, but I don't need money because I could also get shelter if I went and worked on a farm.
Yeah.
You know, like there's ways of getting things without money. And money is just the way that we use right now because it's an institution that we all agree upon. Okay, well, that piece of paper lists this and this and this, right? Like we were talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's we need to use it because it's part of our society, and I understand it, but I just understand it on a different level, I think, than a lot of people do. And then money comes easy to me when I'm like that, right? That's the thing. Like money comes and money goes, and I like to give a lot of my money too, right? So I'll go out and I'll buy food I live, like I said, on the east side. And every single time I go to Costco, I buy food for the homeless. Even if it's like twice or 3 times a week, I make sure that I buy food for them if I'm buying food because I have the money to do so. So I want to help them, you know, and I think that's good to like reap the benefits, but not only reap them, but spread the benefits to the people that don't have those benefits right now, right? And that's just good. That's just good energy for everybody, right? Like, you know, again, Alan Walsh talks about that. Technically, everything we do is for selfish gains, but it's like, what kind of selfish gains? Like, I do that because it makes me feel good, right? And there's good energy coming through. Well, that's kind of a selfish thing, but that's a good kind of selfish, right? Like, I'm not hurting someone with that kind of selfish. I'm benefiting people, right? So it's interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely different kinds of selfishness.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's like giving to a charity, you know, like these rich people give to charities and they're doing it because they're getting tax write-offs, but that's a good thing because at least they're helping people to get those tax. So
it could be doing a lot worse.
It could be doing a lot worse, you know, they're buying Maseratis, you know? So it's great. Right. So my path has been a very interesting one, to say the least. But I've had a lot of love and support along the way. You know, a lot of people that have believed in me and that have set healthy boundaries. You know, like my parents at one point said, no, you can't come home. Like, we're not helping you anymore. And I had to go into the streets. And that was the best thing for me, man. Like, I know it's hard. Like, it must have been super hard for them to have to see that and witness that. And like, literally my mom would be like, yeah, every time the phone rings, you're like, is there going to be him? You know, when we got the fentanyl epidemic, you know, and I OD'd, I think 4 times on fentanyl. So yeah,
jeez,
I've died a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so that's a scary thought. And not only just my parents, but like, you know, all my aunts and uncles and friends. And most people didn't think I was going to make it out of there. You know, I was pretty bad. Right.
Yeah.
But again, it was all part of what I was supposed to do. I did a DMT journey one time and I got to meet 2 of my guides. It was a girl and I went to this weird office. It was almost like a government building or something like that. It was weird, right? And I go into this office and there's a big desk and she's sitting there and there's a guy behind her holding all these files. And I was silly because this is after Iboga and I kind of know what my purpose is. Well, I knew what my purpose was after Iboga. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do some DMT. I'm going to ask what my purpose is. Like, just like stupidly, right? And I go there and they're like, what are you doing here? I'm like, what's my purpose? And she looks at me and she's like, what? Like, you know? I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I do. I'm like, yeah. She's like, you know what you signed up for when you went down to earth. Like, you accepted this assignment. We knew you could handle it. You knew you could handle it. Now go down there and do it. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool, thanks, right? And I'm a bit of a smart ass too, you know, right? And as I was leaving, I'm like kind of walking out the door and I look back and I was like, hey guys, what's God? Real quick, right? And the girl like rolls her eyes and she's like, oh, you mean the like eternal energy source that fuels everything? I was like, yeah, that one. And then I boom came back to earth. I was like, okay, so that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So, and then, yeah, I can't do DMT anymore because they've banned me. Every time I do it, it scares the ever-loving crap out of me. They won't let me back there because I'm asking too many silly questions. I got a purpose now, so.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah. So, but yeah, some amazing journeys. And there's more plant medicines that I'm going to be going down because one of the things that I really want to be able to do is help people decide on what plant medicines that they want.
Yeah.
So like not everybody resonates with different medicines, right? Because there's ayahuasca, there's Iboga, there's Huachumo or San Pedro, it's the cactus, peyote, mushrooms. Like it goes on and on and on, and there's all these different ones. So I want to be able to at least try them once to be able to be like, okay, that's what that experience is like. And then what I can do is like listen to their story, listen to what's going on, and be able to be like, like ayahuasca, from what I understand and have heard and read, is a very feminine, loving energy. Like Iboga is a very masculine, like slap you upside the head, like shake you, like this is what you got to do, and it's not really soft at all, And mushrooms is definitely like a connection one, like I said. So it's the different, well, like I said, the modalities and how they work, like even like cacao or like rape, and there's so many different things, and it's just like building this tool belt, right? And it's empty right now, and I'm just putting the tools in as I'm going, right? So it's like, okay, well, what needs to get fixed here? All right, well, this is a tool that helps fix this. This is a tool that helps fix that, right? And yeah, that's what it is. It's more like giving the people the tools to fix themselves is what it is, right? Like, they talk about shamans or providers or medicine people, and they don't do the work, right? They just provide the space, the medicine, and the guidance if things are going rough for you to do the work, right? And they're the people that have gone through it before, right? That's literally what a shaman means, right? It's like a dream walker. It's someone that has been to these dreamlike states, experienced them, understands them. And now if you're going through something, you can be like, okay, well, this is what's going on. We need to go this way or this way, and a lot of it is telling people to go into it, like, they're like, oh, I feel like this is I'm dying. I'm like, okay, well, surrender to that then. Like, don't worry. You're okay. You're safe. You're not going to die, but just surrender to the fact that you feel like you're going to die. And man, as soon as you stop fighting it and you're just like, all right, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm actually not dying. Like, oh, that feels good, and it's just your ego holding on is what it is, because the ego, that programming, is this like illusion, right? And it doesn't want to die, right? Like it wants to hold on because it's literally your survival mechanism. It's why it's there, is where it's there to protect us. And then the ego is beneficial. We don't want to get rid of the ego. And the ego is very beneficial. We just don't want it to control us. So yeah, you get to that point where you, again, have that ego-assisted life, as I like to say. And then it's more beneficial because you're not reacting out of here, you're reacting out of here. Yeah.
I think that's a great way.
Yeah. Easier said than done, though.
Yeah, lots of practice.
Yeah, tons of practice.
Which it sounds like you're not having trouble with.
Yeah, well, it's like things like meditation are beneficial too. And that's the thing, like you don't need to use plants either, right? Like it's like plants are kind of like the highway to get there, right? Instead of taking the footpath, right? The footpath is things like meditation, and then you can go with breathing work too. Breathing work is actually quite a fast way to have some beautiful insights to yourself and to connect. Doing holotropic breathing where you're like for like an hour. It's really hard to do. But then when you stop, you feel like you're in a psychedelic state. You are in a psychedelic state, right? And psychedelic doesn't necessarily mean plants, right? It just means that you're going into your brain pretty much, right? Yeah. So the psychonaut, right, is someone that psycho comes from the Greek word, mind, right? And not is this sailor, right? So it's technically like a mind sailor, someone who can travel through your mind and kind of find what you need to find, right? And then there's things like lucid dreaming too. Like these are beautiful things that it can work for you, right? Like it takes a lot of training to do that too, right? Like, checking your palms every, couple hours, checking your fingers, reading stuff and asking yourself, am I in a dream? And then when you're dreaming, you'll do that. You'll check in as a reality check in a dream. And if you're in a dream, your finger will go through your hand and you'll be like, whoa, oh, wait, I'm in a dream. Instant lucidity, right? And now you can do some work, right? And you can do some cool things. Astral travel is very similar to that. So there's some different techniques you can do for that as well, through meditation. And, also like, And the Boweeders thing where you can just stare off in the distance, like pick a point, like look at that socket and you're just staring at it. And just try not to blink and you just stare at it, stare at it, stare at it. And it actually activates your third eye. And then you can go some places. Yeah. So there's a lot of different things.
Yeah, it's cool how things outside of like being induced through medicine and other stuff that you can do it with as well. But yeah, also nice to take the highway sometimes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you know, depends how far gone you are, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, you know, it's you're too far gone and you need that quick reset, right? To reconnect. And that's the catalyst that helps you get there, right?
Yeah, it kind of opens things up and then you can play with it on your own after.
Yeah, exactly. And like, this is the cool thing too, is like, you know, you're able to go into, like I said, I was a Christian, right? So I don't disregard myself as a Christian now. I still believe in Jesus. I still believe in God. I still believe the Bible. I just believe now that the Bible is kind of cryptic, you know, like that you got to read between the lines. I believe that Jesus was a little bit misinterpreted in the Bible with what he was saying, because if you read a lot of his stuff, he talks about these different things. Like there's psychedelics in the Bible, I believe. There's books written about this and different things that talk about this. You look at Moses, right? And he saw the burning bush and it talked to him, and that was God. And yeah, I bet you he did see a burning bush, and I'm pretty sure God did talk to him, but I think he had something in him that kind of got him there. And like there's stuff like the acacia tree that comes from where they were in Egypt there, and it's high in DMT. So like, who knows? Did he smoke some of the bark? I don't know. I wasn't there. Did he eat a mushroom? Who knows, right? And like, it was a lot different 2,000 years ago there too, right? And then they talk about, you know, him walking through the desert. We walked through the desert for 40 years, right? But how did they survive in the desert? Well, they had manna. The manna would show up in the morning, and then when the sun hit it, it would wither away and maggots would eat it. That's exactly what mushrooms do. The mushrooms like wither away in the sun, and then the little tiny worms eat it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they would eat. It talks about, you know, turning the manna into tea, mushroom tea. Jesus would turn water into wine, right? Well, they didn't call it mushroom tea back then. Wine was something that just got you inebriated. You know, wine was just what they called everything, right? So like mead was wine, all this stuff. They just called it wine. They don't talk about different forms of booze in the Bible. They just talk about wine, right? Yeah. So Jesus would turn water into wine. I personally think he would throw some mushrooms, pour some water on it. They would drink it, and then they would get inebriated, right? And Jesus talks about the third eye. Jesus talks about having your body being filled with light. Like all these things, if you find them in the Bible, point to Jesus being like very spiritual. Like, and he said like, yeah, he's the son of God. But here's the thing. All of us are sons of God. We all come from God. He realized it, and he was trying to tell everybody else that was the good news, man, that like, yeah, you come from God. You're one of God's sons, and you have power in you beyond belief. But most people don't wake up to that. And they misinterpret what he said. And that's why they killed him, is because he said he was the son of God, right? It's funny, like the Messiah finally came, like it was prophesied, and then they kill him, you know? And then not only that, but like then they don't write the Bible right away. So there's a lot lost over the years. And then obviously within translation too, because like it was written in Greek at first, and like Hebrew and all these things. And like there's a lot of words that they don't directly translate, right? Like to meditate means to like think on something, to like kind of like think of, but not just to think about it, but it's to constantly think about it, like almost like a cow when he chooses food, right? It's kind of like what meditation means in Hebrew, is like, so you're like, all right, okay, and then you put it away, but then you bring it back up, and then you chew on it a little bit more, and then you bring it in, and that's how you get to the truth, right? Is to keep thinking about it. And then, interesting enough, you have people like Thomas, you know, the book of Thomas didn't make it to the real Bible, you know, but he's got a book. Yeah. And you know why? Because he's the esoteric teachings, right? So it's like the more mystical teachings, the magical teachings of Jesus. But they didn't want to put that in there because that's not going to benefit the church, right? Because the Bible creates a guilt state in people, a fear state in people, and then they're more easily controlled. which is unfortunate, but it's the way the world's worked for
Yeah.
thousands of years now. Right. So, but you see people being more spiritual than religious now. Right. And and that's the thing, you can still believe in Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha and all these people, and they're all right, man. None of them are wrong. None of them are the truth, just the truth. They're all the truth put together. And that's the thing. Don't get stuck, right? They're all kind of like these like hurdles, and you're going along, and each one comes. And if you get there, you don't want to be like, oh, that's it. Now I'm a Christian and I'm stuck here. Like, this is it. This is all I have. No, man, keep going. Jump that hurdle. All right. No, this is Buddhism. Oh, interesting. You take a little bit of that. Oh, and Taoism, and Zen, and all these different teachings, and they all kind of create this beautiful mixture, and you just got to keep adding to it. That's what really gets you to that place of truth and knowledge and wisdom that will set you free, man. Yeah, like real enlightenment.
Yeah, I love that, like kind of trying everything on and taking what makes sense and building an overall truth around it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what they were trying to tell you to do, and they're giving you like these guidelines of how to get there, and they all pretty much say the same thing, and that's the beautiful thing, right? And it's like, you look at Buddha, right? Like people like, like the monks who sit there and meditate, and Buddha didn't reach enlightenment while he was sitting there. He sat there for however long it was. I forget how long he sat there for, but he sat there forever, and he didn't reach enlightenment until he left.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't get stuck, right? Like, don't get stuck. That's the thing. Life is about experience. It's about forward momentum. If you get stuck in any one thing, that's going to cause a lot of issues, I personally think.
I agree.
For most people. There's some people out there that, they find Christianity and they they attach to it, and they become beautiful people. But it's almost like they actually get what Jesus was saying, and they actually believe in it because they don't judge other people. Whereas most Christians I know do judge people. They're like probably some of the worst in the world, right? And they get stuck with, oh, I have to do this and I need to do that and da. And they turn their back on people, and I'm like, that's not what Jesus was teaching you. But there's some of them out there that are just like, yes, and doesn't matter what you bring to them, they love you and they listen to you and they understand you, and like that's Christ consciousness right there. And that's what they talk about, and that's what you're trying to get to. So however you get to it, do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but for me, I needed to keep going, and I needed to kind of almost create my own thing and take from them all, and it's, if you do, like I said, listen to like Alan Watson and people like that, that's kind of what they do too, right? Like Eckhart Tolle, they talk about all the teachings, and they've created their own spiritual teaching, and that's what worked for them, and then it helps other people, right? So yeah, that's what we're all doing. We're all just walking each other home, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's I don't know I don't know where to go with it now. I think, man, we've covered so much stuff. I've really enjoyed listening to your perspective on all this stuff, and how your journey has shifted, and your thoughts and things on your beliefs. It's inspiring, and it's cool to see.
Thank you, man.
To see all of that. Is there anything that you feel like? Is there anything that you still feel like you want to share that you haven't covered that's important to you?
All I have to say is love's the most important thing, man. You gotta love yourself. That's what it's all about. Find yourself, love yourself. Because when you get there, man, everything's possible. Like, you'll be able to love everybody truly. And love is not just love. Love is forgiveness. Love is acceptance. Love is surrender. It's all those beautiful things that you have to come to, and they're all based in love, right? And so it's all about love, man.
Oh, that's great. Okay. I think that's a perfect way to end it, and something that everyone can, I think there's a lot of actionable stuff in here for people to take and to learn from. And I'm excited to share this. And I can also, do you want to link your business and stuff?
The website's not
episode?
quite done yet,
but even the Instagram profile or something?
Go for it. Yeah, it's just at Silo Care.
Okay.
I can send it to you.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and people can reach out to me if they like. I'm always willing to help anybody who's looking for guidance.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
And or, send them in the right direction, right? Like, not everyone's going to resonate with me.
No.
But, that doesn't mean you should stop, right? Like there's lots of people out there that, especially there's like the masculine, feminine thing too, right? So if there's any ladies out there listening and they need some guidance, I know some beautiful, beautiful medicine women out there that are just more than willing to help, right? So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sweet. Well, yeah, we'll link everything up so everyone knows where to go for more information and to get in touch with you. And
perfect.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you coming out and doing this. And yeah, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay.
Cheers.